In this video, we'll take a closer look at the use of variables for storing references to Word objects. We'll be talking about using variables to store references to the document object, the range object, the table object, and the row object. However, as you'll see throughout the course, variables can be used to store references to any Word object. Let's scroll down to the bottom of the Section 3 module. And what we'll do in this tutorial is to create a macro that creates a new document, then creates a new table in that document, and adds headings to the first row of the table. And let's just call it Object Variables. I'll switch across to Procedure View, and we'll begin by declaring the variables. So it's logical to start from the top of the hierarchy. So the first object that we'll be creating is the container for everything else, which is the document. So dim doc new, since it's a new document that we'll be creating, as document. Next, we'll drill down inside our new document and access the range object. The range object can refer to 100 pages, to a paragraph, to a word, to any range you specify. Inside a blank document that has just been created, the range object refers to the insertion point, to the blinking cursor. So dim rng new as range. Inside the range, we'll place a table object. So dim tbl new as table. And in order to put some text inside it, we'll refer to the first row of that table. So let's dim row headings as row. So those are our four objects, and it's obviously logical that we'll start at the top of the hierarchy with the object that contains all the others. So we start with the document object. To populate an object variable, we use the keyword set, as opposed to let, which is optionally used for data variables. So set doc_new equal to, and we then put any statement which refers to a document. In this case, we want the statement that creates one. So it's documents.add. That gives us our new document. We now want to populate our range object to point to the contents of this new document. So we can say set rng_new equal to docnew.range. Because the document is blank, rng_new equates to the current insertion point within the document. And at that insertion point, we now want to create a table. So now it's set tbl new equal to, and what we can say is docnew.tables.add, and then in brackets we specify three parameters. First of all, the range within that document where we'd like the new table to appear, and of course this is where we put in rng_new. Secondly, the number of rows we'd like, let's say 2, and thirdly, the number of columns. So that will create our table, and by default it won't have any borders, so the table itself won't be visible. Let's say we prefer it to be visible. A nice simple way of doing this is to say tbl new.borders.enable equals true. And now let's add headings to the first row of the table. First of all, we'll set our variable row headings equal to tbl new.rows brackets 1. We can now target the text in each of the cells in that row object. So row headings dot cells 1 dot range dot text equals, and let's say name, and we can then copy this line. So just move the cursor to the left edge of the line, one click to select the line, Control C for copy, Control V 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we change these to 2, 3, and 4. So we have name, let's say date, amount, details, and that's it. So obviously this is a fairly small sample of working with these objects, but in a typical macro you would be doing more manipulation with each of these objects. So having them in a variable is a very efficient way of being able to manipulate them simply by using the name of this variable. Let's just test that this works. So we'll save and run. And let's check our new document. So everything seems fine. We've got our table with 4 columns and 2 rows. Just one final point before we leave this topic, and that's the technique for removing objects from memory. It's obviously not very important in this specific example because it's so brief, but if you want to do some memory management and just free up memory by resetting variables that you no longer will be using, here's the syntax for doing that. So let's say we've now finished with our table, we want to remove it from memory. We would use set tbl new equals nothing. So the nothing keyword is reserved for use with object variables. Let's just run it again. And obviously we get the same result. But from a memory management point of view, that variable is no longer taking up any memory. Let's just save, and we'll finish this section by looking at the use of the with, end with structure. Those of you who've done some VBA will probably be asking yourselves, why didn't we actually use with and end with in this context? And that's the topic of our next video. Using variables to store references to Word objects helps to make your code faster and more efficient. When assigning objects to a variable, remember to use the keyword set. To remove an object from memory, use the syntax set my object equal to nothing.